Oh, man. Join me as I dive into this wild story of how I started my own prison gang at just 17 years old. I never planned on starting my own gang, especially not at 17 years old. But there I was, fresh into a 13-year sentence, 17 years old, already leading an organization. But let's get into how we got there. So if you just now tuning in, I was arrested at 15 years old. I was bound over at 16 years old, and I was sentenced to 13 years in prison at just 17 years old. So when I got sentenced and finally sent to prison, they sent me to juvenile prison, but it was on an adult prison, if that makes any sense. What I mean by that is because I was a juvenile at the time, they didn't mix us into congregation with the adults. But I was classified as an adult prisoner at the time. But because I was underage, they placed us in a unit where it was nothing but juveniles and waited until I turned 18, and then they placed me on the adult. Man, join me as I dive into this wild story of how I started my own prison gang at just 17 years old. I never planned on starting my own gang, especially not at 17 years old. But there I was, fresh into a 13-year sentence, 17 years old, already leading an organization. But let's get into how we got there. So if you just now tuning in, I was arrested at 15 years old. I was bound over at 16 years old, and I was sentenced to 13 years in prison at just 17 years old. So when I got sentenced and finally sent to prison, they sent me to juvenile prison, but it was on an adult prison, if that makes any sense. What I mean by that is because I was a juvenile at the time, they didn't mix us into congregation with the adults. But I was classified as an adult prisoner at the time. But because I was underage, they placed us in a unit where it was nothing but juveniles and waited until I turned 18, and then they placed me on the adult unit with the rest of the population. So in the meantime, as soon as I get to the juvenile center, the juvenile pod, which was placed on the adult prison, I get approached by a homie of mine from my city that I knew. And he pulls out a piece of paper with my name on it. And he proceeds to tell me that he wants me to be a part of this gang that he's a part of, and that they had already written my name down to be a high rank in this gang. Now, I did not come to juvenile to be a part of anyone's gang, nor did I have intentions on, like I said, starting anything of that nature. I was here to do the time that was given to me. That was it. That was all. That was the last of the conversation that me and him had of that. I told him that I didn't want any parts of it and that I was just there to do my time, and that was it. Now, he had came at me respectfully, unbeknownst to my knowledge. He had came to me respectfully because they had admired me. He had knew of me from previous juvenile center. He knew how I operated and what type of momentum that I would bring to his gang. Now, like I said, although I respected the offer, I declined. Now, after about 2 weeks of me being in the juvenile prison itself, I had a good enough idea of who was who and what was what. Now, from my experience there, after about 2 weeks, I had noticed that there was a lot of gang activity. There was a lot of organizations, movements, cliques, crews, whatever you want to call it. It was a lot of that going on. It seemed like almost everyone was involved, affiliated in some manner in a gang. Now, if you weren't affiliated in one, you were being taken advantage by one, meaning you were being extorted, just outright extorted, or friendly extorted, meaning I noticed this a lot in prison where guys would befriend people. They would come in the disguise of being your friend. They would start up just random conversation, asking about family, acting as if they like honestly cared about, how you were doing throughout the day, things of that nature. But then at the end of a conversation or at the end of a lockdown, they will always proceed to ask you for something, whether it be a pack of noodles or a Kool-Aid pack to drink, or a Little Debbie to snack on, or even to use the pen to call out during the night. So it was just all kinds of favors and things like that people would, use people up for. And that would be called friendly extortion. So you weren't just plain outright just taking anything from someone, and you weren't just plain coming out saying like, hey, yo, I need this, I need that from you. But you was coming more in the disguise of as a friend, as someone who, you would talk to on a regular basis every day, but their intentions weren't good. Their intentions were they only wanted something to drink. They only wanted to use your phone. They only wanted to get something to eat real fast. That was it. They don't genuinely care about you or anything that they're talking about. They're just friendly extorting you, basically using you. And so, I noticed a lot of that going on. And because I had been, incarcerated at such a young age, because I knew firsthand how a young person can get taken advantage of, because I knew firsthand how, a person can come in the disguise of that they rock with you, but they really just want you to do something. It's basically like to their convenience. You know what I mean? So they'll use you or they'll befriend you just because it's convenient to them. It's convenient to them and it's beneficial to them. But if you don't have any use or any significance to them where they can't use you, then they won't even be around you. You know what I mean? And unfortunately, I witnessed that a lot. And because I witnessed that a lot at a young age, not only did I witness it, but I also reaped the consequences of it also. Like, I reaped the consequences of it. I didn't ever want to see anyone else like go through that. I didn't want to be the cause of that type of pain, and I didn't want anyone to be a victim of that on my behalf. So after about 2 weeks of me being in prison, in juvenile prison, I noticed that it was a lot of gang activity, and it was like the norm. It was like the normal in there. You know what I mean? And it's like almost as if you weren't in it, involved with it in some type of way, then prison was not so much as hard, because if you a stand-up person and you're not tolerating like any disrespect, or and you can hold your own, then things will go smooth for you. You know what I mean? But on the other hand, if you get into an issue with another gang or something, let's just say, for example, you get into an altercation with a member of a gang, then that member has hundreds of people that have their back. So not only did you get into it with this one individual, but you got into it with him and everyone who is also affiliated with this person or stands behind this one person. So it gets kind of tricky when you're in prison, because you can be a stand-up person and you can be able to be willing to, take on the world. But at the same time, realistically, can you take on the world? You know what I mean? So it gets kind of like to a point where, you don't want to seem like you need people to have your back, but you have to have some allies. You have to have some allies when you're in prison. And if you don't, then things can get kind of tricky sometimes. And you don't want to find yourself on the receiving end of that, and you don't have anyone to have your back. You get what I'm saying? So I found out early on in juvenile, thankfully, that I was able to go through juvenile prison and learn these things quickly. But I learned early on that, having allies was not only smart, but it was also kind of, beneficial. So because I didn't want to be a part of anyone's gang or any organization that was already in motion, I began to formulate my own organization quietly. And what made me really do it, like the final nail that was in the coffin that really made me just go ahead and start my own organization, was this. I was looking out the window one day, and I talk about this in previous videos, but I was looking out the window one day in juvenile. I was 17 years old. And as I was sitting in this cell and I was looking out that small window, it was day room. And as I looked around, I just saw hundreds of young teenage faces from the ages of 11 to 17 years old, just walking around this unit, basically like a warehouse. And it was just so many young faces. And it was heartbreaking because these were my peers, but for some reason I felt like they were my brothers. They were my siblings. They were my blood of some sort. And I connected with these young youth because I was one of them myself. I had found myself in the belly of the beast, and it was a reality at that moment. It dawned on me of what was actually taking place. Not only were we incarcerated, but they were also taking our youth away from us right in front of our eyes, and we didn't even recognize it. And it was scary. It was scary to think that they had a place so isolated, so far away from civilization, so far away from your family, so far away from your friends, so far away from any resemblance of humanity, that not only will you lose yourself, but you will also lose sight of reality. It will slowly break you, break your mental, break your spirit, and break your soul if you allow those walls to. And when I looked out that window, I saw my peers running around this unit, lost, just like I was. I saw my peers alive, but like the Walking Dead. They were like a bunch of zombies walking around. And at that moment, I don't know why, it was God. That's all I can say, it was God, because I have no other explanation of why at this moment of time I chose to receive this message of enlightenment. Because prior to that, I was just like those guys. I was just like my peers. I was just like those who were running around into any and everything. Trust me when I tell you, I was into any and everything. If it was destructive, I was into it. I lived a destructive life. I grew up in a destructive household. I know about destruction. It's all I know. I grew up in a destructive environment. That's the life. That was the life that I knew. But at that moment, something dawned on me. And all I can say is that it was God. And I'm grateful that at that moment I received that blessing. I'm grateful that at that moment I received clarity of what was going on because it saved my life. And at that moment, I decided that I wasn't gonna join a gang, but I was gonna start one. And at that moment, I didn't know what it was gonna be called. I didn't know what the motivations of it was gonna be. I didn't know the goals. I didn't know literally anything of the nature. I didn't know how big it would be, but I knew that I wanted to start something for my peers that would not be destructive, and that would be productive, and that would be beneficial, and that would help them grow and develop into men, solid men who would be fearless and able to take on the world once they were released from those chains. That's what I wanted. And the journey began. And so it's funny how it all started. At this time, I had been incarcerated for almost 2 years. I had been incarcerated since the age of 15. At this age, I was 17 years old. So I had quite a bit of time incarcerated, and I was familiar with the ins and outs of prison at this time, unfortunately. Now, by the time I get sent to juvenile prison, I'm well versed in the day-to-day politics of prison. I know how it goes. I've had my few share of scuffles, and so I'm very well aware of how things go. Now, like I said, one of my little homies had approached me with the opportunity to be high rank in this gang, which I declined. Now come to find out, another one of my homies had started his own gang, which was called Scheme Team. And this was another Ohio, Cincinnati original gang. And how it would be separated was like this. Because Ohio is such a big place, it's small compared to other states, of course, but Ohio is such a big state with a lot of cities that in juvenile, it's so many guys from so many different cities. So how we separate it is by region. So your region will automatically link up with region, you're closest to your region. So if it's down south, say Cincinnati, Columbus, Dayton is in the southern region. That's who is affiliated with each other in prison. Now, Cleveland, Toledo, Akron is in the northern region of Ohio. So they will all be affiliated with one organization as well, and they will be affiliated with each other, and they will link up with each other in prison. Now, if the southern region ever gets into an altercation with the northern region of Ohio, then it's a war between not only Cincinnati, but Cincinnati, Dayton, Columbus, Springfield, and every other southern region versus Cleveland, Akron, Toledo, and every other northern city of Ohio. You get what I'm saying? Boom. And vice versa. Now, sometimes you get guys from the southern region, Cincinnati, Columbus, Dayton, that are in northern region gangs because of one reason or the other. Whether they were intimidated to be a part of it, whether they, whether they were persuaded, like I was, to have high rank, it's a multitude of reasons why guys from the northern region don't belong to gangs of their region and they go to like the opposite gangs. You see that a lot in prison. Now, it's a very dangerous game to play, because once you join the opposite gang versus your region, then now you're telling your city and your region that you no longer have ties to the region, but your loyalty is now solely tied to the gang that you're involved in now, which is the opposite of your region. You get what I'm saying? So now you're basically going against your home team, which is dangerous in prison, because once you leave prison, if you get out of prison now, you know, everyone in your city knows that you went against the team. You went against the home team when you was in prison, which is not a good look. And then also, you know, you can get hurt in prison by somebody who was from your city or something like that, because you done went against the city by proclaiming the opposite gang, your loyalty to this opposite gang. So, you know, that's like playing with fire. You just don't want to do that. You know what I mean? You just don't want to do that. So one of my other homies had started his own, you know, gang, which was a southern region gang, Cincinnati, Columbus, Dayton type of situation. Now, he also had approached me with the same opportunity to be a part of that gang also, which was called Scheme Team, which I also respectfully declined. You know, bro was my homie, and I respected bro. That was one of my homies from Juvenile Center when we was kids, you know what I mean? So I knew of him, very familiar with him and how he got down. And, you know, he for his age, he had been incarcerated since he was like 13 years old. He was very, very, very big kid. He was like a grown man size because he had been locked up since he was 13 years old. And I mean, at this time we was 17, so it was like just crazy. His hands was built like gorilla hands. He was in ODYS also, which is Ohio Detention Youth Center, which is like prison for juveniles. He spent time there, where he was also a leader of a gang also. So he wasn't, you know, new to, you know, being in leadership position in prison and running his own organizations and things of that nature. He wasn't new to that. And he respected me enough to, you know, respect my decision to decline. Now, another thing that I had witnessed being on the juvenile prison was that normally guys didn't have an option. It was like, I don't know if y'all familiar with the movie with Beanie Siegel back in the day, State Property, when they would say, get down or lay down. Like, it was like that type of situation. And no lie, these kids would actually press down on you and tell you that out their mouth, verbatim, get down or lay down. And it was like one of those situations where it would be 15 young dudes and they pressing up on you in a small little bitty cell, and it's just you versus 15 young dudes that, you know, vary in size, and they all ready to jump on you if you say you not getting down with them. So it's a very dangerous game, and you have to play it smart, because one wrong move can cost you, it can hurt you. You know what I mean? I've seen guys get hurt very, very, very badly, lose their life by, you know, some of these young kids jumping on them and stuff like that. Just imagine 15 to 20 people just jumping and stomping on you repeatedly. You know, like, I've seen the worst of the worst. Like, it gets crazy, trust me. So, you know, when you're in a tight spot like that, it will make someone, you know, be like, shit, I'm not about to get stomped out by 20 guys, you know what I mean? Shit, I'm getting down with y'all, you know what I mean? So, because you know what they say too, if you can't beat them, join them. So, you know, some guys would play that, position, and then they get mixed up in these gangs and stuff, but they didn't want to. It's not like they came into prison and was like, oh yeah, let me join y'all, like I'm trying to get down. Like, no, it was just more of a situation where they didn't really have a choice. Like, it was either that or get their heads stomped in by 20 guys. 20 guys with 2 feet each. Whew, oh my God, that's crazy. So, you know, and luckily I had a choice. Luckily, I had a choice. So that's why I'm just telling you that, because some guys in prison, they don't have choices. So luckily, I was given a choice, and they respected my choice enough to say, you know what, we respect bro. You know, we know he don't want to join. You know what I mean? And that's that. Luckily. But they could have continued to press me. They could have continued to, you know, every single day. Like, I seen some guys get pressed every single day. About 15 guys every single day. You getting pressed 15 guys every single day. You have to fight 15 guys every single day. You'll get tired of that stuff, you know what I mean? And eventually you'll just cave in and be like, you know what? I'm tired of fighting y'all dudes, bro. I'm gonna just join y'all, you know what I mean? So, like, it gets crazy, bro. So never think like that guys in prison that's involved in gangs is just in it because they think it's cool. Sometimes they didn't have a choice. Sometimes they were literally pressed to be in those gangs. So never just judge a book by its cover. I'm just telling you that. When I did finally start my own thing, I looked at it like this. I saw firsthand how a lot of the other gangs was moving. I saw that the leaders of these gangs was just really basically using these young dudes to their advantage, and they was making them do whatever it is that they wanted them to do that was beneficial to them. So yeah, they would have these young guys going in, beating on other young guys for snacks, for Little Debbie's, for ramen noodle packs, for Kool-Aid packs. I would see these guys, you know, have these young dudes at their will, terrorizing other individuals just for fun. And sometimes these young kids, they would get in trouble for that stuff, and they would get sent to the hole, to solitary confinement for days or weeks. And now they can't even get on the phone and contact their mom or their dad. And it was just a sad situation to see these guys in, all because of, you know, a leader, their own egotistical motives. It was a shame to see some good guys, some good young dudes getting taken advantage of like that. And I didn't like it. I didn't feel comfortable with it. And I wanted to see something different, because I was a young kid. And when I was, you know, I seen these 11-year-old kids. I was 17 years old at the time. So I remember, you know, being 12, 13 years old and getting taken advantage of by the older homies in the hood, because they saw that I was, you know, willing to do whatever for them because I thought that they really cared. And I was willing to put my life on the line, literally, for some of these older guys. And for what? For what? Nothing in exchange. And it was a shame, and I didn't want to see that cycle continuing. So I decided to, you know, start a organization, a gang, whatever you want to call it. But this time I wanted to raise leaders. I wanted to raise people who would become self-sufficient, not sufficient or not relying on me to lead them, but no, I want to introduce you to certain things that will make you sufficient on your own to be a leader. And even if I was taken out of the equation, even if 7 was taken out of the equation, you would still be okay. You would still be well enough to live a functional, productive life. That's what I wanted for my bros. And so, because that's what I wish that someone would have wanted for me. So that's what I chose to put out into the atmosphere, was what I wish someone would have wanted from me. You get what I'm saying? And it wasn't easy. It didn't happen overnight. It was a very hard process. It was very, a lot of thought went into it. It wasn't nothing that I just, randomly started picking guys like, hey, you want to be a part of this? You want to be a part of this? No, it was nothing like that. It was actually very time consuming. Like I said, I put a lot of thought into it, and I actually critiqued a lot of people. I put a lot of guys under, a process of watching. I watched guys for, days, sometimes weeks, until I thought they were, until I, saw them for them. Like, I wanted to see a man without you knowing that I'm watching. I want you to just, boom, and I'm observing you. And as I'm observing you, I'm seeing how you handle yourself on a day-to-day. And as I'm observing and I'm witnessing exactly how you are and how you deal with people and how you deal with interaction and deal with altercation on a daily, then once I can say for certain that, you're a stand-up guy, then I'll approach you and I'll, give you the opportunity to be a part of that. So when I first get on a juvenile prison block, there are 3 known prison gangs. The first one was the one that initially had approached me. They was the head busters, or most commonly known as the HBs. And you throw they set up like this, the H and the B. The HBs, or the head busters, was a originally a Columbus gang that was started in ODYS, in the Ohio Detention Youth Services, by a guy named Pistol Pete. Now, the reason that the head busters was started was as an opposing group to the Cleveland gang that had also started in ODYS, called the Heartless Felons, or more commonly known as HF. As the head busters and the Heartless Felons began to get older into adult prison, the head busters fizzled out. You would find the head busters here and there at different locations, but nothing major was being done or talked about with the head busters in adult prison. Now, on the other hand, the Heartless Felons that was originated in Cleveland, Ohio, they were very, very, very prevalent in the adult prison as well as in the juvenile prison. And they went on to run some prisons, like totally run the whole prison. And they will begin to be like almost like a real problem in the Ohio prison system from every prison. And then it was also the third gang, which was on the juvenile pod at the time. It was Scheme Team. Now, Scheme Team was a fresh gang that had just started by my homie that was also from my city. So now, by there being a Columbus gang, which is a southern region, now there's also a Cincinnati gang, which is a southern region. So automatically, the Scheme Team and the head busters united to make their cliques or their gangs even bigger than what it was. So now instead of just dealing with a scheme team member, if you got into it with a scheme team member, that was one thing. But now you had to deal with scheme team and the head busters. If you ever got into an altercation with any of them. Versus just the Cleveland boys who had the Heartless Felons. Now the Heartless Felons, one thing about those guys though, was they would send those Cleveland boys into the juvenile prison every single day of the week. It's like every time you turn around, a new kid coming into the pod, where is he from? From Cleveland. The next day, it's a new kid on the block. Where is he from? Cleveland. And you automatically know that these kids are joining the HF because that's their home team. That's their home gang. So instantly, as soon as they touch the compound, their numbers are getting bigger and bigger and bigger every single day because every day, kid coming in from Cleveland. And automatically, as soon as this kid touches the pod and he finds out that the Heartless Felons are here, he's going to join the Heartless Felons because 9 times out of 10, he's already been a juvenile before, been in juvenile prison. He's already in the Heartless Felons. They run even on the streets. Like Bloods and Crips, they're even on the streets of Cleveland, Ohio. So 9 times out of 10, they was representing the Heartless Felons on the streets. So they come to prison, they're continuing to be a part of what they already are. Like, it's a no-brainer. Like, it's easy for them. You know what I mean? It's like, come on. So that was the dangerous thing about going against the Cleveland guys. It's just because it was so many of those guys. Anywhere you went, there was just so many of them. And they all was HF, like, you know what I mean? So, and they all willing to go. Like, they going. Like, they're not gonna leave anything on the table behind this Heartless Felon thing. Like, you know what I mean? Like, they're gonna put it all on the line for this thing. Like, you know what I mean? You know what I mean? Like, seriously, like, I've seen these guys crash out on officers, like guards, administration, like white shirts, like they're lunatics, like, you know what I mean? So those was the 3 well-known prison gangs when I came through the door at 17 years old. These was the options. These was my options. Now, I didn't want to participate in any of these groups because I knew, for one, that their codes of conduct didn't align with my principles. Their rules and regulations did not adhere with what I believed in. It was just, I just was at 17 years old. I had already been through a lot. You know what I mean? I had been involved in the streets. I had been locked up since I was 15 years old. I had been involved in the streets since 12 years old. Even before that, like, oh my gosh, like, you know what I mean? Even before I had jumped off the porch, I was seeing the street life on a regular basis because, you know, my mom and, you know, my environment, that was just nothing new to me. You know, violence was nothing new to me. Destruction was nothing new to me. Dysfunction was nothing new to me. None of these things were new to me. So, you know, being in this position at 17 years old, it was like kind of normal, unfortunately. You know what I mean? So, but what was new to me was becoming a leader. What was new to me was making a difference. What was new to me was saying, you know what, I'm not going to continue the same destructive cycle that hurt me. I'm going to change up the path that I'm on, and I'm going to, you know, lead my homies down it with me if they willing to, you know, follow my lead. And that was the new thing for me, and that was the hardest part of everything because I had never had the courage to, you know, say, I'm not joining y'all doing that destructive stuff. Instead, I'm gonna do this. When the homie said, yo, let's go, let's roll, let's do this, boom, 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 I'm the first one to say, shit, you know what I mean? You ain't said nothing, you know what I mean? But it was new for me to say when the homie said, yo, let's do this, let's go roll, let's do boom, boom, boom. And I'ma say, yo, I ain't doing that. And then everybody else like, what? You ain't rolling, you ain't sliding, you ain't. That was hard. That was hard. Getting that reaction from your homies, from your friends. That was the difficult part. But I did it. And when I did it, I saw the glares. I saw the resistance a little bit in their eyes. But at the end of the day, no one bucked up enough and said, nigga, F you. You know what I mean? Because that's what I really expected. I expected, people to be like, what? You ain't rolling? Yeah, we about to, you know what I mean? Like, but nah, it wasn't that. It was just more like, all right, he ain't riding. He ain't going this time. He ain't, you know what I mean? And then it was just, after a while, they knew I wasn't coming. You feel me? They knew that. They knew not to even ask me. Like, after a while, it was just like, 7, we out. You know what I mean? And that was the moment when I knew I was different and that what I was doing was different, and they respected it. You feel me? And that's what I wanted, and that's what made me feel happy. That's what made me feel proud. You feel me? It was when I could stand on my own without the homies, without bro Joe Smo and them, you know what I mean, and still get respect. That's when I knew that I had leveled up. So the hardest part was making the change. But once I made the change and I recognized that they admired the change, well, I recognized that they respected my decision to change. And then after a while, I recognized that they admired my change. You see the difference? At first, I recognized that they respected my decision to change. But that didn't mean that they wanted to deal with me. Because once you change, your friends, they change on you. Because y'all begin to not have the same things in common anymore. The way that you view things are different. Your conversations are different. The things that you chasing are different. You're not chasing the same goals. You're not doing the same things any longer. And sometimes that rubs people the wrong way when you're not indulging in the same destructive behaviors as they are. Because they be like, what you feel like you better than me? You know what I mean? And in their head, they feel less than because you not partaking in a lot of destructive behavior that they are. So they feeling like, yo, we don't even want him around because when he around, he don't pop pills. When he around, he don't drink it. He ain't drinking a lean. When he around, he don't want to slang the iron. When he around, you know what I mean? So that makes them feel less than. It's nothing to do with you. It's nothing personal. You know what I mean? It's just something that they have within themselves for whatever reason that may be. No one says that they can't clean up their act. No one says that they have to continue doing the same things as everyone else their whole life. No one said that. And you're not looking down on them because they continuing to do that. You just chose to do something differently at this point in time. It's not like you weren't just running with these same guys. You know what I mean? You was just, it's not like you not the same person. You just choose not to partake in the same activities any longer. You did it for this many years already. I mean, it gets old. It gets to a certain point in time where you have to change the way that you moving, the way that you doing things in order to elevate, in order to prosper, in order to get to the next level. That's why it's called leveling up. You can't level up by doing the same things as you did the last level. No, that's not gonna work. You have to level up by doing new things. That's how you level up. If you don't do new things, you're doing old things, that's gonna keep you on the same path, the same things. It's just that simple. Once I recognized that not only did they respect my decision to change, but they admired me for changing, it hit different. Because a lot of guys, you know what I mean, they change and people change up on them. They start, you know what I mean? They don't want, bro corny now, bro lame, bro this, bro that. But on a real, I always was able to keep the connection with the people because I never treated it like I was above anybody else. It was just more so a thing like this. Bro, I really come from nothing. I got incarcerated when I was 15 years old. I never knew my father, bro. My mom was a drug addict and an alcoholic, bro. I got locked up at 15 years old. I got bound over as an adult when I was 16 years old. I got sentenced to 13 years in prison when I was 17 years old and lost my mom when I was 18 years old. So by the time I was 25 years old in prison still, I had to make a decision, bro. I had to make a decision for myself because at that point, I had nothing left. At that point, I had nothing left. The system was trying its best to break me. And I was fighting every single day to keep my sanity, to keep my spirit, and keep everything that I had. And so when it came down to that, I had to make a decision. And the decision was the streets over my mental or losing my mind. Because I was ready to lose my mind, y'all. Like my brother did. I could have lost my spirit in there. I know some brothers, you know what? Look, I'm going to tell you a brief little story. I was 19 years old and I was in a cell. They placed me in a cell with a person who had 35 years to life. And as I was in a cell with this 40, 50-year-old man who had already been down 18 years already, as I was in a cell with him, and I had finally got to know him after months, you know, I asked him, I said, OG, man, you know, at your parole coming up, I know you can't wait to get out. He looked at me dead in my eyes and he said, I don't want to get out. And I thought that I was tripping for a second. And I had to look at him and I said, what you say? And he looked at me and again, dead in my eyes, and he said, I don't want to get out. And a part of me broke. And I said, why? He said, bro, I've been locked up 18 years, bro. My mom gone, my dad gone, my kids grown. I don't know nothing about the world. He said, all I know is prison, bro. I've been here since I was 17 years old. He said, what I'm going to do out there, bro? I'm better off in here. And you know, normally I try my best to give good advice. I try my best to give good advice. And I try to uplift anyone around me and try to give them, you know, words of encouragement. But in this situation, I was totally speechless. I was totally speechless. It was nothing. It was nothing on this world that I could tell this man, who was older than me. He old enough to be my granddad. It was nothing I could tell him, my 19-year-old self, even though I wanted to. But I know I couldn't. And it was crazy, bro. But that showed me that prison can and will break a man's spirit. Because for a person to say that he never wants to get out of prison is absurd, bro. I never in my life would ever say that. I never in my life could imagine myself saying I don't want to get out of prison. Even if I did 100 years in prison and they told me, yo, you know you getting out tomorrow. Even after I did 100 years, I would be like, yeah, all right, bet, I'm getting out, bro. But for this person, he felt differently. He had broken spiritually. He had broken spiritually. And that was a reality check for me at that time. So here we are, 17, and I began a process of recruiting people to be a part of my gang. And I came up with the name Young Hooligans. Now, the way that I came up with the name Young Hooligans is just because I remember them always referring to young black men as being hooligans. When you grow up in an urban community, I remember they always refer to us as a bunch of hooligans. And when I would look at all these young kids in this prison pod, that's what I always thought of, was a bunch of hooligans. And it was funny to me. It was kind of like the thug mentality that Tupac had with Thug Life. It was like using something bad and then reversing it and then making it positive, kind of. So when I looked at these hooligans, I didn't see hooligans though. They saw hooligans, but what I saw was a bunch of just hood kids of one love and gathering a nation. That's all I saw. I saw a lot of potential. I saw a lot of strength. I saw a lot of power. I saw a lot of resilience. I saw a lot of pain. I saw a lot of story. I saw a lot of, grit. I saw a lot of it in these young kids' eyes, in their movement, in their actions, in their survival, in their day-to-day response to life. That's what I saw. And so I wanted my organization, my gang, to reflect just that. And I began a recruiting process. And the first member was one of my partners, one of my main partners, who you will later on begin to know. His name is Five. At this time, his name was not Five. We call him something different. But he was the first person that I recruited into Young Hooligans. Now, I remember him when we was in juvenile center, growing up in prison. I met him when I was 15 years old. I was 16 years old, pardon me. I was 16, he was 15. And he had got locked up for attempted homicide at 15. And I met him and we became real close in there. And my mom actually became very close with his mom also, and would come to visit us on numerous occasions while we was locked up together. So me and his friendship had became very, very close. Now, I got sentenced to prison before him. So he came prior to me. Now, when he gets there, at the time I had been formulating this plan on starting my own gang. So when he gets there, I'm like, boom, it's the perfect time to, put my plans in action, because it's no one that I trust more than this kid here. And so everything began when he got there. I approached him and I, let him know what it was that I intended on doing. And of course, he was behind it and supported it. just like I knew he would. And from there, he actually helped propel Young Hooligans to the next level, because in leading any organization of any stature, as a leader, you have to know your place and your strengths and your weaknesses. And that was always a very, very good thing of mine, was I was able to recognize not only my strengths, but my weaknesses also. And I'm not afraid of admitting it. A lot of people, they want to be strong in every area. But sometimes you have to know, what you can and what you can't do. And some people are better at doing things versus others. That's just how it is. And so I knew my strength was organizing. I was able to recognize potential and organize it and communicate verbally exactly what it was that I wanted to put together. And so that's what I began doing. I took Five, brought him into the fold, and he's a very outgoing individual. So I knew that automatically he would bring a lot of other good, solid souls to the table, because he was just genuinely a good, solid person. And so anyone that he interacted with, I knew genuinely that they would be good people. And that's exactly what happened. He proceeded to bring a lot of potential to the group that was very helpful. You know what I mean? Because me necessarily, I knew that, I could only do so much. As a leader, I could only do so much. And so I started putting other people in position to fulfill the spots that I couldn't necessarily fill. You know what I mean? And that's how it began. So as we continue to grow, I began formulating a plan to not only develop the individuals who were a part of the group, but I also wanted them to benefit financially from being a part of the group. Because it's one thing to say that you got a bunch of guys up under your umbrella, but then it's another thing to actually say that you're taking care and feeding these same individuals. It hits different, it speaks volumes, and it makes the individuals more loyal to not only you, but to the group. And I looked at that as just something else that I would have wanted someone to provide for me if I was a part of their group. I would have wanted someone to have that available. You know what I mean? So that's what I did. I created a kitty, sort of like a bank, and where the members would, every month we would place at least $5 into the kitty. And the reasoning for the kitty was to always make sure that we had items available or money available for anyone at any given time that was a part of the group. Now, I also made sure that we all had a hustle, because if you have a source of income, then you can never go broke. So, and the source of income would come from the source. And what's the source? The source is you. You are the source. So you are the source of income. All you have to do is look within yourself and find what you're good at, your strengths, and use that to benefit financially from it. So if you can play basketball, don't go outside and just be hooping for the fun of it. No, go out there, put some money on the line, and make it worth your while. You get what I'm saying? If you know how to draw to some extent, use that to your ability. Don't do anything for fun. Don't do anything for free. use everything that God gave you as to benefit from it. Because ultimately, that's what it was given to you for. It's your God-given talent, period. So that's the type of mentality I began installing into my members. And they started picking up on this energy that I was given. So I had a bunch of young cats just on a grind. And they were basically outcasted from society. They were outcasted from the system. They were thrown away like garbage. They were told that they wouldn't amount to anything in this world. They couldn't ever be productive ever again after, catching the crime that they caught. But I was there feeding positive energy into these young kids, letting them know that the world was there, the sky was the limit, and they could accomplish anything. I was there telling them that, and actually pumping not only that energy into them, but giving them the material that also aligns with that mentality, that aligns with that energy. You feel what I'm saying? And they loved it, because I also needed that. And I felt like that's why I was putting so much purpose and passion into it, because I really needed that at the time. And so I was really just giving these guys what I really needed. I was in dire need of self-development, and I was putting myself through this strenuous process, and they were basically just on their ride along with me. And I was grateful to have them, because I don't know how I would have, survived juvenile without them. Because like I said, in juvenile and in prison period, allies are very important. Now, don't think by any means that the whole time while I was there, that I just had my way and everything was smooth, and that I was just able to start this gang with no bumps in the road, because it wasn't. Trust me. For instance, I got crashed on when I was in there. We had started getting into it with, we started getting into it with the Cleveland guys that I was telling you about earlier. And I should have known that it was bound to happen, because we were just two of the biggest cities from Ohio. And when you have a bunch of young guys that are pumped up on pride, ego, and BS, you tend to get a lot of problems. And that's exactly what happened. I had got someone touched, meaning whacked. I had got someone whacked from Cleveland, because I was feeling very disrespected about what they was doing, the way that they were behaving, and the way that they were coming at me personally on the juvenile pod at the time. I just couldn't go for it, because as a person of leadership, you have to maintain your power, and sometimes you have to flex your muscle a little bit in order to get your message across. Unfortunately, especially in prison, it's a violent place. So I got someone whacked, and in return, they got me whacked. Now, I didn't think it was gonna go out like that. Honestly, I didn't think that they was gonna directly attack me. I thought they was gonna attack someone else close to me or something like that. But no, they came straight at me. They didn't even, waste any time. I mean, it took a day or two or whatever, but yeah, they eventually did come at me. It's so crazy, because we was on high alert. Like, me and my whole gang was on high alert. Everyone rocking with me was on high alert at the time, but they still got it off. And dude that they sent, he got one punch, boom, hit me from the side as soon as I was coming up the steps, coming in from church. And as soon as he hit me, I didn't even feel it. I turned around, pivoted, and then I just took off on him, hit him like 5 times. And from that point, the guards rushed us, sprayed us with mace, handcuffed us, took us to the holding cell in the back, where he was proceeding to tell me that, the gang had made him, the Heartless Felons had made him do that. And he said that if he didn't do it, that they was gonna crash on him and things like that. So, he was doing a lot of pleading, but at that time, I wasn't trying to hear nothing that he had to say. I wasn't trying to go back and forth with him. I had made my mind up, in that holding cell that, I was gonna do what I was gonna do, regardless of anything he had to say, because he had already made his decision to do what he was gonna do anyway. So, I ended up making a decision that ultimately, I lined a lot of my guys up with their guys, and, it was fights like, for like maybe a week and a half straight, just continuous fights on fights. Even in a hall, it was fights. And that's how we ended up eventually getting over that, until my side ended up winning. And then, it's like a power struggle. It's like, so we're gonna keep on mashing the gas until you guys basically submit. And once they submit it and let us know that, we done, we had enough, then, then we can continue on in peace, you feel me? But until then, we gonna keep on just mashing the gas on you boys until y'all finally tap out. You know what I mean? That's how we gonna play that. So that's what happened. And that was a whole nother story. Now, I eventually accumulated up to 25 to 30 members in Young Hooligans over amount of the time while I was there on a juvenile pod for a year until I turned 18. Now, before I had left, I had passed down my crown to my second in command, which was my homie Five. Now, I gave him my crown because I felt like at the end of the day, he was gonna be the person who took it, cherished it, and took it seriously. You know what I mean? Which he did once I left. But I prepared him. I kind of tried to prepare him like 2 weeks prior before me turning 18. So he would have like a just be comfortable in a position of leadership now all of a sudden. Because you can't just throw someone in a power position like that. You have to kind of gradually, let them lean into that, especially if it's something new to them and they're not very familiar with leading an organization. It's kind of, tedious. It's tedious. It's a lot of work. You're responsible for 25 to 30 people at one time. And so it's a lot. And they're needy. They're needy. They always want things. They always asking for advice, you know what I mean? So it's a lot. And if you're not prepared for it, then everything will go down the drain, and the people in the group won't even want to be in a group anymore. So it's a lot of hard work, and I prepared him for that 2 weeks before I turned 18. So by the time that I left, he was fully prepared. Now, once I did turn 18, it didn't take long before he started a war again with the Heartless Felon Cleveland group, and which he also won. But in the midst of that, I ended up meeting a brother named Derek Dawson. And I later on would also meet his father named Ronald Dawson in prison. So that was one of the positives out of that whole situation, was me meeting Derek Dawson and Ronald Dawson and the Dawson family from Columbus, Ohio. I'm very grateful for meeting Derek Dawson in juvenile. Well, I met him when I turned 18, but he was in juvenile at the time, and then he later on turned 18. But he was a part of the group that I had started, Young Hooligans. And so we had formed a friendship, a bond once he turned 18, because he was, I was hearing a lot about him holding it down and representing for the group that I had started. So once he turned 18, I obviously had embraced him with open arms and showed my appreciation by giving him a care package, made sure he was well taken care of when he turned 18, because again, these are just things that I would have wanted someone to have done for me if I was a part of their group. So I will always make sure that I showed the utmost respect and gratitude towards all of my members by any given chance, any given chance. Even though, you know, gangs are very destructive, I know firsthand, because not only was I part of one in prison, I was a part of one before I went to prison. I'm very familiar with gang activity. It's nothing new to me. So I know firsthand how destructive gangs can be. But in this instance, when I was in juvenile prison, it taught me that you can also gather together with a group of guys and do positive also. And if you put your mind to it, you can actually help build something positive with your group versus something that is destructive and destroying the minds and the futures of the youth. You know what I mean? So I'm grateful that I was able to do what I did when I was in juvenile. I'm grateful that I was able to touch the lives that I touched, because a lot of guys still to this day, they tell me how much that energy that I was putting into them meant to them, and how even still to this day, they still live by a lot of the things that I was teaching them. So it's very inspiring to know that God put something so big on my heart, and so amazing. And I'm just grateful that I was able to carry it out, and I look forward to continuing, you know, the greatness that I had began so long ago, but just in a different capacity. Because of course we don't want to promote gang activity, but we do want to promote getting together for the righteous things and organizing in a positive cause that can be beneficial and not, you know, causing any harm or causing any destruction. So that's the message that we want to promote with this video, y'all. Thank you so much for checking us out tonight. Make sure that you like, share this video, and comment, please, if you enjoyed this story time. Make sure that you continue to share these videos with anyone and everyone that you know. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm so grateful that we touched 1K, y'all. We are currently at almost 1,200 subs. So we got a lot of accomplishments to be grateful for, y'all. Count the small blessings, and we have so much more to look forward to. So stay tuned in, because this is only the beginning. Until next time, the only thing stronger than me and you is us. 7 up till we heaven up. You already know. Peace.